Good afternoon, everyone. As Peter said, I'm Laura Washington. I'm a contributing columnist for the Chicago Tribune and also a political analyst at ABC7. And I'm delighted to be here today to facilitate this very important conversation. As you know, we're here to talk about community violence intervention, or CVI. The roots of CVI go back to the late 1990s, but the folks that represent these four organizations and their organizations all launched about a decade ago. This was at a time when the city was experiencing another surge in gun violence. As we all know, Chicago has struggled with gun violence for many decades, but has recently seen dramatic declines in shootings. Our panelists today will be the first to tell you that we still have a long way to go and that the numbers are still too high, but they are also hopeful, and they're going to share why this afternoon. So I want to get right into this. Again, congratulations to the four of you for the decade of the crucial and important work that you've done in this city and to the organizations that you represent. I want to start by asking each one of you to ask what brought you to this work and what is there about the time frame 2016, 2017 that prompted you to all get engaged in CVI. I'd like to start with Vaughn and maybe then move to Esther.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. Not a super interesting story. I happened to run into Rick Estrada at a Leadership Greater Chicago luncheon, and he invited me to lunch to tell me about Metropolitan being invited to convene Communities Partner for Peace. We had sat on a board together, Chicago Allies, back in the day during the time that I was working at the Park District. But before I worked for the Park District, I worked for Chicago Public Schools, where I built the Safe Passage program. So I think it was probably the combination of our relationship and me doing that work that brought me to this work.
Great, thank you. Esther Franco-Payne.
Hi everyone, Esther Franco-Payne, Executive Director with the Partnership for Safe and Peaceful Communities. And personally, I came to this work as a young girl growing up in Inglewood and wanting to give back to my community. And it was just as simple as that. I'm a social worker by training, and I became involved in violence prevention and criminal justice work following Columbine. So that particular incident and several throughout sort of kind of laid the trajectory for me to be in this work. But for PSPC in 2016, 2017, there were a lot of contextual factors going on in the city, and a few funders came together to ask themselves, what is it that they can do? What can we do about this issue? The video of Laquan McDonald's murder had just been released. Violence was at an all-time high. Partners were on the ground trying to think about strategies and community-led solutions for how to address such significant numbers around violence. And the Police Accountability Task Force had come together as a result of the consent decree that had come upon Chicago at that time. And so with these funders, our five funders, founding institutions being MacArthur Foundation, Joyce Foundation, Polk, McCormick, and the Chicago Community Trust, it was an opportunity for them to really figure out how can philanthropy contribute to creating a safer city and creating peaceful communities in the city that we love. And so that was the impetus for PSPC, and we've since grown from those five funders to over 50 funders participating in PSPC throughout this decade. So we're proud of that.
Yes, and that's an important, we're going to talk about this citywide partnership, but they are obviously an important element in it. Teny Gross, what brought you here 10 years ago?
So this was an accidental thing for me. I'm an Israeli who came to Boston in '89 to study, and just very close to my school, the Charles Stewart case happened when he shot his pregnant wife, and he called 911 and said, "A black man just shot my wife." It's a big thing in Boston. So I got involved as I was studying photography, involved with young people, teaching them photography, who were involved in violence or were locked up. We did the exhibitions together and showed it to judges, probation officers, faith-based leaders, and they expected that we all leave, that we will abandon them, and slowly I realized not only am I living in the neighborhood, but I'm not leaving it. I started my mornings in Dorchester Court, and eventually this thing became known as the Boston Miracle, but it's a lot of people who worked on it. And then I was recruited by Catholic Church to Rhode Island, similar thing, and then was recruited to Chicago in 2015. A month after I came here, the Laquan McDonald video was released, and that changed what we were going to do. I was going to build something small just to model some of the work that was done on the East Coast. Instead, we were seeking partnerships to build something bigger because it became a lot bigger.
Right, absolutely. Obviously, the Laquan McDonald is just one piece of it, but it's a very important piece. Arne, Duncan, you had just recently come back from Washington, D.C., and your very important stint as Education Secretary. So how did this come about for you 10 years ago?
First, very quickly, I just want to thank everybody. It's pretty emotional to be here today and to look at this 10-year journey that we have all been on together. But it's really important to say there are folks in this room and not in this room who've been at this work for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. We stand on all of their shoulders. We would not be here without all of that. So I so appreciate the people who brought us to this work. A couple things, Lord, growing up playing basketball on the south and west sides, I had some older guys who protected me and gave me safe passage in and out of neighborhoods, and I started to lose some of them to gun violence when I was a teen, and that shapes you and scars you in some ways that are probably a little bit difficult to talk about. And then fast forward 20 years when I took over the Chicago Public Schools when I was 36. Lots I'm proud of. I can come back and talk another time about all of our accomplishments, but on my watch, in my 7.5 years, on average, we lost a child to gun violence, a student, every 2 weeks. It was a staggering rate of loss, and that was by far the hardest part of my job, and everything else, academic achievement, budgets, labor management, operations, constructions, was wildly easier to that. And I always say it's never the kid's fault, and we as adults were failing. Whoever we as educators, we as community leaders, we as parents, we failed to keep our kids safe on the south and west sides, and it's not right and it's not fair. And coming home, I want to try and do whatever I could to right that wrong.
Thank you. So this is a very complex issue, and we know that a couple of you have already pointed out, this stuff didn't start yesterday. By some estimates, since 2016, Chicago, Cook County, and the state of Illinois and the private sector have invested roughly $1 billion in CVI. We know that the gun violence has declined steadily after 2016, then it shot back up during the pandemic, then it declined over the last 4 years to a 60-year low in 2025, which is an amazing feat that we need to applaud. Now we can't directly attribute that decline to CVI any more than we can attribute it to policing, but the question is, what would you say to the average person who's not that familiar with the work you do, who might be skeptical about $1 billion? What do you have to show for that $1 billion investment over 10 years? Arne, I'll start with you.
I'll start there. $1 billion over 10 years is a lot of money. But let's be very honest, the police budget is over $2 billion every year. So it's a fraction of that. And this is not a competition. Great to support the police. But what's fascinating, Laura, is not just the violence down like 54% since the pandemic, as you said, 60-year low. What people don't understand is that arrests are also down like 32%. So violence down 54%, arrests down 32%. The only plausible explanation, we're not arresting our way out of it, is people are changing behavior. Less people are shooting. More people are de-escalating. People are healing from trauma. And that's a collective work of all of you here, and again, people not in this room. That's why violence is going down. And so I think we can draw a direct, can't prove causation. Then the final quick point, just data, for me, the numbers are very important. If you look at the neighborhoods that have gone down the most since the pandemic, West Pullman went from 37 homicides a year to 7. That's a neighborhood we in CRED are deep in. Austin is the second neighborhood. That's where Teny and his team and others are deep in. The third neighborhood is North Lawndale that we and many of our partners are in. So 3 neighborhoods that are driving down the violence the most all have a very significant CVI presence. That's not a coincidence.
Right, and in your view, it's worth the investment. You would agree with that?
It is worth a lot more investment than is in there today.
Yeah.
And to be clear, the city puts in about $22, $30 million a year. What the city spends every year on police misconduct settlements, not on the police budget. Police misconduct settlements is several $100 million a year.
Right.
If CVI just got half of police misconduct settlements, this work would go to a different level.
I'd like to go to Teny and Vaughn and on this, if you want to make your case for why this $1 billion is worth it and what do we have to show for it?
So I'm really tired of making the case. Why are we making the case when we invest in people in the community, right? It is one of 20th percent. Like we spend $25 billion on police, hospitals, jails. This is we're talking about so many things: unemployment, disinvestment in the community, lack of assets. This is the one field that's just very practical. We shut our mouths and we go to work, and 2,000 people with backgrounds are getting supported, getting mental health, getting a future. People told us they're not interested, they want to deal on the corners. We knew it's a lie. Give us 6,000 spots, they will be filled in a second. So we need to stop. This is the right thing to do for our citizens, for people who live in our community. And we can't afford it. It's bad capitalism to send someone to a hotel called jail, says we're going to spend $60,000 or you're going to be away from your kids, your family is going to be evicted. So I'm done apologizing.
Well, okay, and what I'm hearing too is just the cost is too high not to do this because the costs, other costs that will occur if you don't do it. Vaughn.
Yeah, at a very practical level, I think a lot of us like to say that the people who are closest to the problem are a part of the solution. And so our work inherently hires, trains, supports folks who live in the neighborhoods, are credible messengers, are building relationships with people that are most vulnerable to gun violence and in helping them turn their lives around. But in the midst of that, they're turning their lives around and they're getting trained through the Peace Academy and they're raising families and really upskilling themselves. And we have people who have been frontline workers that have risen to the level of management and executive leadership in CVI. So we're really building an industry. And the vast majority of the people in this industry are people with criminal backgrounds and who have lived experience. And so building an industry with the people closest to the problem, I think is a sort of no-brainer of why it would be working.
Okay. Quick, yeah, Arne, go ahead.
Real
quickly.
quick, just it's so important, 10 years, look back, but also look forward. We've built this largely on private sector investment. And what we need, and Teny's so articulate talking about this, we need a public sector, public health infrastructure. We need a permanent public health infrastructure separate than the police that gives people an off-ramp to cycles of violence. And absent that, we're going to continue to be 4, 5, 6 times more violent than New York and LA. But we can institutionalize this, just build it in. We fund police every year, we fund firemen every year. If we could fund a permanent public health infrastructure of people, as Vaughn says, who may have been part of the problem, who are most invested, who's most concerned about safety on their block, than people who live on that block or raising their kids on the block. No one cares more than them. If we can build this in over the next 10 years, so every year we're not scraping and scrapping and trying to keep this going, that would be what success looks like.
What percentage of that $10 billion is publicly funded? What percentage of that $1 billion is for publicly funded?
Oh, the majority of it is still
Okay.
publicly. The public sector in the last 10 years, well, let's say
I'm not talking
years.
about foundations. I'm talking about
City, county, and state.
Yeah, right.
I don't know about a percentage, but it's pretty high.
significant.
Like it's pretty
Okay.
significant. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right, I'd like to move on to, I think someone referred earlier to partnerships and bringing, and I think, Esther, you talked about it, bringing people to the table across different sectors. There's a broad and unprecedented ecosystem that's made all this possible. There's 3 levels of government. The philanthropic sector is involved, the business sector is involved. You're getting at least acceptance from the law enforcement community, which wasn't something you could always count on, and the political support. So could you talk about, Esther, could you start, and maybe Teny, you could pick up, but how did that happen? How did that partnership, that ecosystem develop?
Yeah, so for PSPC, it's certainly partnership and collaboration is a significant part of the work. Like, we cannot do the work without partnerships. And so I think part of that, and first and foremost, it starts with the partners that are working on the ground, partnering with all of the organizations, with Vaughn and MPI, CP4P, and each of the organizations that sit within that network is partnering with Chicago CRED as a significant lead in this work. And it is partnering with those people, those leaders who, as Arne just articulated, want to see change in their communities. And so partnering with those who are leading those community solutions has been a very significant part. It's not philanthropy sitting behind the walls and, in the back room, like dreaming up this stuff. It is us hearing from our partners to understand what the needs are and provide the resources from there. And so bringing those funders to the table, that partnership was formed, and then it was building the evidence. And so I know we'll talk a little bit more about data and things like that, but building the evidence to make that case that this work works, that these community solutions work, right? And so with that, PSPC has been heavily invested in research as well and collecting that evidence base. And that's what brought a lot of the public sector dollars to bear, is demonstrating that, hey, we've collected some evidence, there are things that are working, how can we build upon this? And the first significant investments from the public sector were made with ARPA dollars, the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. And so, that being said, they've kind of followed our lead in terms of, building their collaboration and really thinking about how do they coordinate their dollars? What metrics are they collecting? What does it look like to put dollars in specific communities? And what does it look like to build capacity in those communities? So that partnership and us working directly with the public sector has led to the increase in investments. Now, do we want more, as Arne said? Absolutely, but it has been a significant, strong showing of support, partnership, engagement from the public sector to grow the dollars this far, as Vaughn has said, a significant amount of investment. And then lastly, I would add that it's also what led the business community to want to come into this work and partner with us to say, PSPC has built a good table, and so now let's pull up a seat. As the business community, we care about this city as well. We want to see economic development. We want to ensure that our city continues to thrive, so how can we be a part of that? So all of us working together and collectively, we've coined it a one-table approach, and that's how we've built those partnerships.
Okay.
So I would say that it really started with community. If we go back to Laquan McDonald, shortly after that, a group of community leaders got together to think through how could we do things differently around community violence. And it was the decision to operate in a coalition, I think, at the community level that was really the impetus in my mind. When Communities Partner for Peace started, we really started from ground zero. It was what are we gonna do beyond sort of the cure violence model of stopping shootings and killings? It was not only stop shootings and killings, but add wraparound services, add a place-based strategy to it, and let's train all of the outreach workers so that there's a standard of practice across the city. And that commitment ultimately grew into the training, brought law enforcement into it. And so I think they respect the work now more today, because every cohort that we have that we're training, there's a law enforcement module that law enforcement participates in. We have shooting notifications that we put out throughout the city in partnership with CPIC. We have cross trainings with hospital trauma recovery centers. So we started to put tentacles in other parts of the ecosystem. We added behavioral health services to the mix. So as we were building this all on private dollars, it made it easier for the state was the first public money to come to us. They had historically been funding cure violence at about $6 million. We inherited that money going into FY21. The following year, when Susan Lee was at the city started funding CVI, and then later on that year, the county got involved. And so that was really the start. And so us coming together as a coalition brought the public sector, and then we said, since you all are funding the same work, how about you guys come together and make this easier administratively for us by, standardizing the metrics that we're trying to measure in terms of success. And so then that led to the Government Alliance for Safer Communities. So I do think that it really did start at the community level, and then as we continued to build, the public sector and the private sector got on board.
Great, great. Teny, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Sure. So I'm a big dreamer. I've done this work in other cities, and this city gets hit a lot on, and this is a celebration tonight. I still can't believe it, with all my rationalism, what this city has delivered, what you all delivered. And with reporting and media today and how we think about things, we always think about the problem. And this is a tough city. Someone who is transplanted it, you live up to your reputation. But the fact that you have 60 foundations, 10 years continuing to meet and didn't just see the effort but stayed, that you have EDs every other Wednesdays, meet every other Wednesday, that you have the city, the county, the state, the government, the state just put 130 million in it, kept it after upper left. Politicians often drink, have an open with us, champagne, and they move to the next cause. This city stayed, we might soon look like Tokyo, like Japanese. We're thinking 500 years in advance. That's something we should give ourselves credit to as a city. This is complex partnerships. It exceeded my dreams. The fact that we're going to have therapists now on our team helping people deal with trauma. Again, as a former Israeli soldier, if you dropped out of high school in Austin, you have 6 times more chance getting killed than we did in Lebanon. That is insane. Right. These are people among us. I know I need to wrap up. You deserve yourself a big, long clapping, and those of you who drink later have champagne.
That's what this is about. It is about a celebration. Absolutely. I want to move up. I want to move to, there are challenges and there are risks in this work, as you all know. Some of the participants in the programs have reverted to crime. Some have been killed. There have been questions about the wisdom of paying ex-offenders and other people involved in the justice system for this effort. What do you say to the critics, and I'll start with you, Arne, the critics who have raised these concerns, and how do you mitigate them? And for all of you, are there other threats other than that threat that you see out there that you need to address? Arne.
Let's just be honest. We live in Chicago. We've had a whole bunch of aldermen go to jail. I ran the Chicago Public Schools. I had 25,000 employees. Unfortunately, probably every day someone was doing something they shouldn't do. We have too many policemen who go to jail. So we do everything we can to mitigate that, but to act like this is the only profession where some people do something they shouldn't do, that makes no sense whatsoever. The fact that the counter narrative is actually, I'm stunned how low our arrest rate
What's the numbers?
It's very, very small. I hate to say it, tragically, we probably have more peacemakers killed doing the work than arrested for doing the work. So that's what I lose sleep over. That's what breaks my heart. That's the weight that I think we all carry. And so, yes, we should do everything we can to make sure people don't, backtrack, don't do whatever. But I've never met a hungrier, more committed, more thoughtful, more all-in group of workers than outreach workers and peacekeepers and our educators and our family case managers.
In other words, you can't single out the few bad actors, and that should not reflect on the work, because
and we should own it, and we'll own it, and we don't make any excuses, and we'll hold ourselves accountable. But to act like one bad apple somehow should take away from the work of a 2,000-person army for peace. That's not logical. That doesn't make sense.
If that was really happening, to be honest, the police would be all over it. Like they wouldn't respect the work the way they do now. If we had guys playing both sides. Now historically, maybe they did, but one of the things we did when we got here is we raised the minimum salary from 28 to 38, and then a couple of years later we went to 45,000, and we're trying to make this a real profession. Yeah. because we don't want people to feel like they have to do something else, so they have to hustle just to make a living. What they do every day in the streets is worth a living wage and meeting the median income.
Is there more work we need to do? And Teny, you can pick up on this and anything else you want to say. Politically, I mean, you know, we've got a president in the White House who hates Chicago, and there's nothing we can do right, but this is the kind of work that would be particularly vulnerable. We're going to have a new mayor. Well, we might have a new mayor. I misstated that one. We might have a new mayor.
We made news.
In a year or so. We were certainly going to have a very vibrant discussion about that. So how do we think about those risks and whatever else you want to add?
The president needs CVI. We're available to serve him if he needs it, or he needs it. But look, when funders meet us and think about investing in us, they're investing in us to take risks. Sometimes we're told, actually, we're not taking risk enough. Our job is to take risk. Like Arne and others, I'm stunned how low level has been. People are in environments that are difficult to survive in, and the fact that it's been so low has even exceeded my optimistic sunshine point of view. On the politics, our society, our brain veers towards something bad on social media, call the police. It's literally a reflex in our society, right? And I do think with all the exposure and writing and success that we've done, we still haven't touched all the audiences we need. And it's going to take, we got to cure white and other part of our society from the idea of you always lock black and brown people.
If I could quickly add, again, for me, it's an interesting idea of risk. Thanks to all of your hard work, we had our safest year in 6 decades last year. That's making history. That's my entire lifetime. I mean, what we did was extraordinary. And many cities are going down on violence since the pandemic, which is great, but Chicago's like the 2nd or 3rd fastest improving big city in America. So the question we've got to ask is, what changed? Did the police change? No. Did something else change? No. What changed is we scaled this work. That's what changed. And so I think, yes, there's always risk, and the work on the streets is very risky and very dangerous. That risk is real, but the real risk is not doing this work. The risk is not doing it.
Okay. Esther, did you want to add anything?
I agree.
Okay. Well, everyone's very well said. Okay. I think we want to start to look forward. A lot of work has been done, important work. You've built an incredible foundation. Looking ahead, how do you see this sector in Chicago a decade from now? What should it look like? What do you think it'll look like? Should it be bigger? Will it be permanent? And how would you make a case, I know you've already talked about this a little bit, for why there should be permanent funding, Arne, you brought that up, in a world where donors change, where donors' priorities change, where taxpayers become unhappy with certain kinds of public investments. So how do you build that case? And what happens if violence keeps going down and people say, oh, we've fixed the problem, we don't need to do this anymore? So how do you think of
hopefully
that?
we are working our way out of a problem, and there's going to be new social problems. That's just the human nature. But I think, start by saying that I think 10 years from now, hopefully we do have that permanent line item, but I think the leadership should look different. I think that if we're doing our job right, then we're preparing the next generation of leaders that come from the people who are doing the on-the-ground work. Like at Metropolitan, every guy who comes to work for us that has lived experience, we guarantee that we'll pay for their bachelor's degree. And so those guys, if they get their education and they continue to be lifelong learners and continue to learn other parts of this work, then they should be leading the work into the future, because I think if they get the academic part, which is easier to get than for us to get what they have, then they should really be running the show and making this a permanent thing that they own.
Okay. Teny?
I agree with Vaughn. In Providence, the organization I started now is run by Lisa Pina. Her brother was murdered. She knows more people in prison than the police does, and she runs the organization. And that took time, right? We brought the college that educated her here to Chicago. 19 of our staff now have a BA degree. So building that succession is hard. There's trauma. because you can hire for diversity, but the CVI field, people who live that experience, preparing them to lead, exposure. So our next steps is classes in finance, classes in management, in leadership, all those pieces. So that will be, because really this is beyond violence reduction. It's a workforce, it's an employment opportunity, so that our city is more evenly built, so people have assets.
Well, that gets back to your point about the whole public health aspect of this, and it's not just violence prevention per se, but there's so many other elements connected to it. Esther?
Yes. Our collective North Star is that Chicago becomes the safest large city in the country. And for us in 10 years, we hope that that is evident by the things that we are doing now. But I also agree with Teny and Vaughn is that we have actually put our trust in empowering communities to lead this work and to lead their own community solutions. And I think if we do that, then government can move out the way, philanthropy can move out the way, law enforcement can move out the way, and we make space for the people who are doing that work on the ground, who know what's best for their communities, and again, that we are trusting in those solutions. And lastly, I would just say that for sure, we want a public health infrastructure. That means that there are line items at city, county, and state levels to support this work. And it does not have to be a fight every single year, every single session to say, hey, we're out here 100, 400 orange shirts in Springfield every year saying, you know, we need you, we're begging, you know, we're doing all the things. It is just a matter of community-led solutions, CVI, alternative responses, et cetera, and that they are funded fully. And philanthropy is here as a support, as a supplement to provide opportunity for innovation and continue building of this work. So that's my hope.
Just a quick follow-up. You talked about the community being front and center and it coming from the community. It may seem like an obvious question, but why is that so important? Why is that crucial to this work?
I think because, you know, we do have this mindset that we are not safe without police. We do have this mindset that people who have made mistakes are not redeemable. And we do have a collective mindset that it is South and West Side versus North Side, that, you know, it's a tale of two cities. And until we can right those wrongs and come out of those mindsets, we won't be able to empower a community to lead their own solutions, and we won't believe fully in community because we are traveling the road with these, you know, we can have a long conversation, but we are traveling the road with these, you know, historic racist policies, the way we treat communities, the way we divest in communities, and so we have a long way to go. We're just not there yet.
So I would say also, in addition to what Esther said, is that partly because people trust the people in their community. So the example that you would give is that during COVID, it was the infrastructure that CP4P had that allowed for us to go out and pass out education about COVID, pass out PPE. We were, you know, deemed, critical employees.
Essential work.
Exactly, so that we were able to, you know, be repurposed for a public health crisis that we were facing. And even when ICE came, like, we mobilized, we had to, you know, do trainings, know your rights, those sort of things. But because we have trusted, you know, members of the community that are working on behalf of the community, whatever public health thing there is, you know, they can come to us because we have that infrastructure built in and it's sustained.
Right, right. Arne, what you want to weigh in on? What's going to happen? Where should we be in 10 years? What should it look like? What do we need to do that we aren't? What do we need to have that we don't have now?
Yeah, so I'll push. I mean, our goal, and you know, we're always trying to set what I call ambitious but achievable goals. I would love to be the safest city in America 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, 5 years from now. And we're about halfway there. We have another ways to go. So continuing to boost quality, continuing to make sure we're reaching those most acutely at risk, continuing to scale the work in neighborhoods so we're reaching a critical mass, not just a couple guys, but a lot. The other piece that needs to come, the business community, civic community has been extraordinarily generous, $100 million for very tough, very unsexy work. We together are massive employers. We heard about 2,000 jobs, but the business community hasn't really come through yet on the job front. And so not everyone can or should or wants to do CVI work. People may want to work downtown at a law firm or at a business or some other place. And so for us to continue to scale, people may age out of CVI work. Do you want to be an outreach worker when you're 60? I'm not sure. So building that pipeline of jobs of our alumni and our workers going into the broader Chicagoland community, not as a philanthropic effort, but because you value that talent, and you know what that talent brings to your place of work, that for me is the next step over the next 4 or 5 years.
And now you said the business community hasn't gotten there yet in terms of making that connection. On the jobs, is there a strategy or a plan or is conversation about how to get there?
There are strategies and plans, we got to execute on them. So, and I think honestly, it really is a change in mentality. What I say all the time is, I understand it's uncomfortable to hire somebody with a background. I understand it's uncomfortable to hire someone with a felony background or a gun charge, which many folks have, not all have. But we're asking our participants every day to put down their guns, to risk their lives, to open up their hearts and do therapy and do things that are incredibly uncomfortable. So if they're willing to make themselves that uncomfortable to trust us every day to come to our sites, on that path along uncomfortability, I need the business community to move a little bit this way, not to take guys straight out of Cook County Jail, not to take guys straight out of the streets, but alumni of our program who've 12, 18 months, they're very different people. CVI workers who've been doing this work for 5, 10 years and want to do something else. It's a really, really motivated, passionate, intelligent set of folks who want to do better for their families. We have to start to create work opportunities beyond the CVI field for them across the Chicagoland area.
As we wind this conversation up, I want to pick up on what you just said. Arne, your goal would be to be the safest big city in America, not in 10 years, but in 5 years. Even after last year's historic decline, our rate of gun violence on a per capita basis is still 4 or 5 times higher than New York, maybe 3 times higher than LA. Is it really possible for Chicago to get there, to shed its reputation as being the gun violence capital of America and become one of the safest cities in the country? How do you get there, other than some of the things you've already discussed? And what gives you some hope that we can get there? And maybe I'll start with you, Vaughn.
I think what gives me hope is what we built so far and the fact that the public sector and the philanthropic sector has stuck with us. I think the other thing is, to Arnie's point, we have to be, as a collective, committed to our participants and their growth, and they have to be also just as committed to their growth. And I think sometimes we want to be comfortable, and learning is something that has to continue, and the courage to be uncomfortable and learn and heal yourself, all of that has to happen, because we understand in the capitalistic society, companies have to make money, and that means when they're bringing people on, the people have to actually produce, and so there's a meeting in the middle of that happening, and that's what the commitment is that we're making. But I wouldn't get up every day and do this work if I wasn't optimistic that we could get there.
That gives you hope.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Teny.
We lost Shay, our supervisor in back of the yards, and she's been struggling and had a lot of losses in her family. And to see, once you get exposed to this work, as someone who came into it, and see what people do when there's a little bit of resources. I just turned 60 in December. I'm still in awe of the people doing this work. It's It's an amazing thing. So that power and that resilience of 400 years and what people are doing here, I know it can be done. Now, the ecosystem that we built here, and I want to give a shout out to Susan Lee, one of the architects as well, is a real engineer. It is fragile. When you have so much money involved, suddenly we got to keep our integrity going. We cannot just take it for granted that we do this work. We got to keep pushing each other. There is a risk now. We got to 60 years best. We got to keep innovating. We got to keep pushing. So this is by no means a guarantee. We got to push each other, but do it lovingly, not destroying each other. It is an exhausting field, but the love there is available in this city is amazing.
That sounds very hopeful to me. Esther, what gives you hope?
Rooms like this give me hope. Just being in a space with multiple partners from different sectors coming together all around this issue, as Arne said, an issue that is not sexy at all, is something that gives us hope. I work in service to our funders, and so, our funders who have that stick-to-itness and who have been in this for the long haul, we fund education, we fund arts, we fund all of these things for decades and years. And so we have committed funders who know and who say and who put their dollars where their mouth is, who say that this is an important issue and that they want to stay committed to it. So that certainly gives us hope. And lastly, I would just say lives saved. Right? People who have second chances and communities that are thriving or beginning to thrive because we are moving away from violence as first nature, right? One of the things that PSPC works on as a policy matter is to stop the flow of guns. And we really have to look at that in order for us to sustain that hope.
Arne.
A couple things give me hope, and this work, if it doesn't do anything else, it humbles you. None of us could do this work by ourselves. It's way too hard, way too difficult, way too massive a problem. But the fact that we've all come together to do this and devoted our lives to do it is extraordinary. And is our collaborations perfect? No. And do we have spats? Do we have to get better? Yes. But this is an unbelievable group of people working together to change lives, and that is beyond, inspirational. And we all deal with way too much trauma and way too much loss and too much heartbreak. And Shay's loss really, really hit hard. She was just an absolute superstar. That was just tragic loss. But my hope, I'm not like hoping the unseen. For all the trauma, the joy of my work is I get to see every day at our sites the transformation that our guys go through. And I look at the talent, and I look at what they're doing, and look at how many of our foreign participants are now staff that I literally trust my life to. And we're in the violence reduction business, but I really think we're in the talent identification business. And the amount of talent that we have found on the south and west sides is extraordinary. That's what gives me hope. It's not hope of the unseen, it's hope of what I see every day. It's very tangible. That's what keeps me going.
And joy. I love that word, joy. This is something that's good that all of you are doing, and it's giving all of us hope. And thank you for the tremendous work that all of you do. Thank you for the work that the organizations you represent do. Thank you to CVI supporters, and thanks to all the men and women that do this work. And thanks to all of you who came tonight, and there's going to be a reception immediately following this program. Thank you for coming.